From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now! Howard Zinn is one of this country's most celebrated historians. His classic work, A People's History of the United States, changed the way we look at history in America. First published a quarter of a century ago, the book has sold over 1 million copies and is a phenomenon in the world of publishing, selling more copies each successive year. After serving as a bombardier pilot in World War II, Howard Zinn went on to become a lifelong dissident and peace activist. He was active in the civil rights movement and many of the struggles for social justice over the past half-century. He taught at Spelman College, the historically black college for women in Atlanta, and was fired for insubordination for standing up for the women. Howard Zinn has written numerous books. He's professor emeritus at Boston University. He recently spoke at Binghamton University, upstate New York, a few days after the 2008 presidential election. His speech was called War and Social Justice.
Why is all the political rhetoric limited? Why is the set of solutions given to social and economic issues so cramped and so short of what is needed, so short of what the Universal Declaration of Human Rights demands? And yes, Obama, who obviously is more attuned to the needs of people than his opponent. Obama, who is more farsighted, more thoughtful, more imaginative. Why has he been limited in what he's saying? Why hasn't he come out for what is called a single-payer system in health care? Why, you see, you all know what the single-payer system is. It's a sort of awkward term for it, maybe. It doesn't explain what it means, but a single-payer health system means, well, it'll be sort of run like Social Security. It'll be a government system. It won't depend on intermediaries, on middle people, on insurance companies. You won't have to fill out forms and pay, and figure out whether you have a pre-existing medical condition. You won't have to go through that rigmarole which has kept 40 million people out of having health insurance. No. Something happens, you just go to a doctor, you go to a hospital, you're taken care of. Period. The government will pay for it. Yeah, the government will pay for it. That's what governments are for. Governments, they do that for the military. Do you know that? That's what the military has. The military has free insurance. I was once in the military. I got pneumonia, which is easier to get in the military. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to fool around with deciding what health plan I'm in or what, No, I was totally taken care of. I didn't have to think about money. Just, there's 1 million members of the armed forces who have that. But when you ask that the government do this for everybody else, they cry, that's socialism. Well, if that's socialism, it must mean socialism is good. I was really gratified when Obama called for let's tax the rich more and let's tax the poor and middle class less. And I said, that's socialism. I thought, whoa, I'm happy to hear that. Finally, socialism is getting a good name, Socialism has been given bad names, Stalin and all those socialists, so-called socialists. They weren't really socialists, but, they called themselves socialists, but they weren't really, you see. And so socialism got a bad name. It used to have a really good name. Here in the United States, the beginning of the 20th century, before there was the Soviet Union to spoil it, you see, socialism had a good name. Millions of people in the United States read socialist newspapers. They elected socialist members of Congress and socialist members of state legislatures. There were like 14 socialist chapters in Oklahoma. Really. Socialism. Who stood for socialism? Eugene Debs, Helen Keller, Emma Goldman, Clarence Darrow, Jack London, Upton Sinclair. Yeah, socialism had a good name. It needs to be restored. And so but Obama, with all of his goodwill, intelligence, all those qualities that he has, and so on, and you feel that he has a certain instinct for people in trouble, but still, he wouldn't come out for a single-payer health system. That is for what I would call health security, to go along with social security, you see. Wouldn't come out for that. Wouldn't come out for the government creating jobs for millions of people, because that's what really is needed now. You see, when people are, the newspapers this morning report highest unemployment in decades, right? The government needs to create jobs. Private enterprise is not going to create jobs. Private enterprise fails. The so-called free market system fails again and again. When the Depression hit in the 1930s, Roosevelt and the New Deal created jobs for millions of people. There were people on the, out there on the fringe who yelled socialism. Didn't matter. People needed it. If people need something badly and somebody does something for them, you can throw all the names you want at them. It won't matter, you see. But that was needed in this campaign. Yes. Instead of Obama and McCain joining together, I know some of you are maybe annoyed that I'm being critical of Obama, but that's my job. That's I like him, I'm for him, I want him to do well, I'm happy he won, I'm delighted he won, but I'm a citizen. I have to speak my mind, okay? But when I saw Obama and McCain sort of both together supporting the $700 billion bailout, I thought, no, please don't do that. Please, Obama, step aside from that. Do what... I'm sure something in your instincts must tell you that there's something wrong with giving $700 billion to the same financial institutions which ruined us. We got us into this mess. Something wrong with that, you see. And it's not even politically viable. That is, you can't even say, oh, I'm doing it because people will then vote for me. No. It was very obvious when the $700 billion bailout was announced that the majority of people in the country were opposed to it. Instinctively they said, something is wrong with this. Why give it to them? We need it. That's what the government, Obama should have been saying, no, let's take that $700 billion. Let's give it to people who can't pay their mortgages. Let's create jobs, instead of pouring $700 billion into the top and hoping that it will trickle down to the bottom. No, go right to the bottom where people need it and get. So yes, that was a disappointment. So I'm trying to indicate what we'll have to do now, and to fulfill what Obama himself has promised: change, real change. You can say change, but if you keep doing the old policies, it's not change, right? So what stands in the way of Obama and the Democratic Party, and what stands in the way of them really going all out for a social and economic program that will fulfill the promise of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Well, I can think of two things that stand in the way. Maybe there are more, but I can only think of two things at a time. Well, one of them is simply the great powerful economic interests that don't want real economic change. Really, they don't. The powerful, I mean, you take in healthcare. There are powerful interests involved in the present healthcare system. People are making lots of money from the healthcare system as it is. Making so much money, and that's why the costs of the healthcare system in the United States are double what the healthcare costs are. The percentage, you know, of money devoted to healthcare percentage is double administrative costs in the United States compared to countries that have the single-payer system, because there are people there who are siphoning off this money, who are making money. You know, their health plans, their insurance companies, their health executives and CEOs, so that there are interests, economic interests that are in the way of real economic change. And Obama so far has not challenged those economic interests. Roosevelt did challenge those economic interests boldly, right frontally. He called them economic royalists. He wasn't worried that people would say, oh, you're appealing to class conflict, you know, the kind of thing they pull out all the time. As if there hasn't always been class conflict. There's something new, you know, class conflict. You're creating class conflict. We've never had class conflict. We've always all been one happy family, you know, no. So, yeah, there are these interests standing, you know, in the way. And, you know, unfortunately, the Democratic Party is tied to many of those interests. Democratic Party is you know, tied to a lot of corporate interests. I mean, you look at the people on the people who are on Obama's economics team, and they're Goldman Sachs people, and they're former, you know, people like that, you know. That's not, they don't represent change. They represent the old style Democratic stay put leadership. It's not good. So the other factor that stands in the way of a real, bold economic and social program is the war. The war, the thing that had, you know, a $600 billion military budget. Now, how can you call for the government to take over the healthcare system? How can you call for the government to give jobs to millions of people? How can you do all that? How can you offer free education, free higher education, which is what we should have, really? We should have free higher education. Well, how can you, you know, how can you double teacher salaries? And how can you do all these things which will do away with poverty in the United States? It all costs money. And so where's that money going to come from? Well, it can come from two sources. One is the tax structure. And here Obama been moving in the right direction. When he talked about not giving the rich tax breaks and giving tax breaks to the poor, in the right direction, but not far enough. Because the top 1% of the richest 1% of the country has gained several trillions of dollars in the last 20, 30 years as a result of the tax system, which has favored them. And, you know, you have a tax system where 200 of the richest corporations pay no taxes. You know that? You can't do that. You don't have their accountants. You don't have their legal teams and so on and so forth. You don't have their loopholes.